This week on Brian Ross Investigates, the never-before-told story of corruption, the mob, and murder plots against the mayor of one of the country's biggest cities.
I was really lucky to get out of there alive.
At the age of 31, Dennis Kucinich was the youngest mayor of a major American city, taking on powerful interests who wanted control of the municipal power company and wanted him out of the way. In a new book, Kucinich describes how he survived. Plus, the latest on the criminal investigation of the Trump Organization. Could the former president face indictment this summer, as the Manhattan District Attorney has begun to call witnesses for a grand jury?
It's likely to be very bad for Donald Trump.
Mr. Trump calls it a political witch hunt and predicts he'll be back in office soon.
We're going to take back the White House, and sooner than you think.
We'll get the inside story from Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter David Cay Johnston.
The racketeering charge could put Donald in prison for the rest of his life if a judge were to sentence him to prison.
And this week's winners and losers in the media. See if you agree with the choices made by the editors of Mediaite.
This whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
From the Law&Crime Trial Network, this is Brian Ross Investigates. Good evening, and thank you for joining us, and welcome to our friends on Facebook Live. I'm Brian Ross, and tonight my colleague Rhonda Schwartz is on assignment. We begin with the never-before-told tale of corruption, powerful interests, and mafia hits. All told by the man who was at the time the youngest mayor ever of a major American city, Dennis Kucinich of Cleveland. His amazing tale is in his new book out this week, The Division of Light and Power. I covered Kucinich as a young reporter in Cleveland. It was the 1970s, and as recounted in the movie Kill the Irishman, the mafia was flexing its muscles.
Inside, Rabbi Rudolph Rosenthal characterized Burns as no saint, but he said the numbers figure had much charity and was often generous and had many
Dennis
friends.
Kucinich, welcome to our program. I have to say, but for the incest, your book reads like a modern-day version of Chinatown. Were you up against powerful corporations, lobbyists, corrupt police, a corrupt city hall, and the Cleveland mafia?
Yeah, I was really lucky to get out of there alive during that time.
You talk about shots fired into your home right there in that house?
Yeah, right behind me on the wall on the left, there was a high-powered rifle shot that went through the place where I was sitting. And had I not moved a split second earlier, it would have hit me in the head. And I can tell you that one of the aspects of the story is this undercurrent of violence, which I never talked about. I mean, the book is the first time I have ever discussed what was going on because, when you're in office and you're a target, you get enough people that might be coming after you without talking about the pros who are out to get you.
Dennis's campaign aides, first of all, proclaimed him the winner of tonight's election and the next mayor of Cleveland.
Dennis Kucinich was the boy mayor of Cleveland from 1977 until 1979. To say that his tenure as mayor was turbulent is an understatement.
Were you at the time the youngest mayor of a major city in America? Who were you making so angry and why?
Well, the big issue that the book is about, the title, The Division of Light and Power, is really about Cleveland's municipal electric system. And there was a long effort to sabotage that system and to take it over by the private utility who was seeking a monopoly. And I was standing in the way. And what I learned later on from police officials is that my stance on protecting that light system, among other things, drew the attention of organized crime. And, it was one of those issues that was involved in assassination planning.
The people voted to keep their power plant, while it cost their mayor his political career.
Knowing what you know now and maturing the way you have, do you think you might take the same stand?
Principles don't change with time. It's really a matter of what's inside of you. I did what was right for the people at the time, and if people today say I was right, I'm glad they do.
Yet you say at the end you have no regrets and you won the day.
Well, I mean, look, life goes on. My approach to life is that I don't have hard feelings towards anyone, but this story is important because people need to know what goes on behind the scenes in a big city, the kind of forces that can drive it, and what happens when one person, in this case the mayor, and it was me, will take on the very forces that think that they run the city regardless of who the people elected. So this, there absolutely are risks that one takes when you challenge the status quo from inside City Hall.
But just as insidious, I think, in your book is your description of how bankers and corporate officials sought to undermine your efforts to reform the City Hall.
Look, people think they know where City Hall is. I found out that City Hall was in the boardrooms of banks, of utility monopolies, of major corporations, of the mob, and all these interests are used to running City Hall in their financial to their financial benefit. And so, when I was elected, I wasn't a novice, but as a young mayor, I think people just expected that that I'd be a pushover. And when I said no, you can say no very softly, like no. But when you say no, and these interest groups who are so used to getting a yes, hear that, they go, well, wait a minute. And so the reaction can be very powerful.
Headlines throughout the media broadcast the battle between the Kucinich administration and privately owned CEI over who would own the city's municipal power plant.
But people elected me, that's who I accounted for. And the big issue was the light system. There was an attempt to steal the municipal electric system. And I stood in the way. I was the only person standing in the way. They needed my signature. It wasn't going to happen.
And you actually write that the big utility that wanted the municipal system caused blackouts purposely?
Absolutely. I mean, it's actually a matter of federal court records and federal investigations. They caused blackouts on the system in order to cause the public to lose confidence in the system. They'd go into the neighborhoods after the blackouts and ask Muni-Light customers to sign up with their firm saying, hey, it looks like your light system isn't working very well. I mean, it's really like a mob-related tactic. You got a nice place here, I want to keep it that way. And so sign up with us and take our electricity, you won't have any problems. They were creating blackouts on the system. And the cover of the book is instructive, the cover of the book is instructive in that regard, because, what we really talk about is light and power, not only about the name of the city's electric system, right, but it's also about how power is wielded and whether anyone can bring light to a situation and actually let people know what's going on. And the story of Cleveland, I'm sure has happened in other places, but I just happened to be the first person who had the opportunity and the time to tell the story, and that I survived to tell the story.
It was Cleveland's banking community that applied heavy pressure on 31-year-old Mayor Dennis Kucinich to sell the power plant, or they wouldn't refinance the city's outstanding bond debt.
What lessons are there for city officials now who are dealing with some of these same issues in their towns and cities?
Yeah, I think the first thing is try not to be obligated. The campaign finance puts a lot, creates a lot of vulnerability for elected officials. Get elected spending as least amount of money as you can, because you don't want to have to be obligated to interest groups. And as I write in the book, I had some spiritual guides along the way who would help remind me that every minute counts, that what happens in a minute when everybody's looking or not, that really counts. And so to me, actually, and it might sound funny coming from someone who's in public office, but, I was always concerned about my soul, even more so than winning the next election, because I actually believe in that saying, what profit a man if he wins, gains the whole world and loses his soul. That's what I was thinking about when I was in the room with the bankers and the council president, with the banker and the council president, and they gave me that final ultimatum about selling the light system. Hey, you know what? I couldn't do it because it wasn't mine to give away.
Dennis Kucinich, I want to thank you so much for being here. A powerful new book. I recommend it to everybody. It's an important part of American history that we haven't known much about until you've written this.
Well, Brian, it means so much to talk to you, and thank you for your service in Cleveland. We met in Cleveland many years ago, and as an investigative reporter, I'm sure you can well understand the kind of footnoting that went on in this book.
Oh, it's great. It is well documented.
In order to back up everything that's said.
All right, Dennis Kucinich, thank you again for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Coming up next, the Trump investigation. He calls it a political witch hunt, but the Manhattan District Attorney is now subpoenaing witnesses before a grand jury, and the former president faces serious legal jeopardy. You're watching Brian Ross Investigates on the Law and Crime Trial Network. The Manhattan District Attorney has now begun to subpoena witnesses for a grand jury investigating Donald Trump, the Trump Organization, and its alleged shady financial dealings. The former president calls it a political witch hunt and predicts that he will soon be back in power.
Take back the Senate, take back the House. We're going to take back the White House, and sooner than you think, it's going to be really something
To get
special.
a better understanding of what could be coming Donald Trump's way, we're joined now by Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist David Cay Johnston. David, thanks so much for being here. What do you think is the timetable here, and how bad could it be for Donald Trump?
Well, now that they have impaneled a special grand jury, which normally has a 6-month time period, you know that it's highly likely it'll be within 6 months, but I can't imagine they need that long to present the evidence to the grand jury. And I think it's likely to be very bad for Donald Trump. I mentioned on your show last September that I thought there's a high chance that Donald will be hit with a New York State racketeering charge. And John Moskow, the great prosecutor, agreed with me about that at the time. And you'll now see that other former prosecutors have come around to the point I first made, that a racketeering charge is likely because it allows the government to, upon indictment, freeze his assets and potentially seize those assets. It also is a charge that people can understand, and it requires finding 3 underlying felonies. Finding 3 underlying felonies by Donald Trump, the Trump Organization, or members of his family, that's about as hard as finding a traffic light in Midtown Manhattan.
And what are the penalties if found guilty of that sort of charge?
Well, the racketeering charge could put Donald in prison for the rest of his life if a judge were to sentence him to prison. He's likely to be charged under the Martin Act with business records misuse. That's a felony that can get you, I think it's 25 years. Donald is looking at the prospect upon conviction of what amounts to a life sentence. Whether or not he would actually go to prison would be up to a judge who could well decide that home confinement would be sufficient. Hopefully, one would think home confinement in Trump Tower, not Mar-a-Lago, given that he's going to be tried in New York.
And what would it mean in terms of the financial situation for the Trump Organization?
Well, one of the things we don't know is what is the financial situation of the Trump Organization. It's a house of cards, and Donald has always been desperate for cash. Money just runs through his fingers the way water does through a hose. And so legal fees alone are going to just consume money from Donald Trump. On the other hand, he's raised several $100 million by essentially begging to the public. And well, he said the money was to overturn the election. He's only spent about $9 million on lawyers for that purpose. So he's got a nest egg he can use for this of a couple $100 million. And I'm sure there are supporters who will send him more money. But any first-rate criminal defense lawyer who's going to take on this case, knowing Donald's history of not paying his lawyers, is probably going to demand a very, very big fee up.
From your point of view, and we know Donald Trump has denied any wrongdoing, and he's called this a political witch hunt by both the Manhattan District Attorney and the New York State Attorney General. From your point of view, what would be the most impressive or effective defense that he could raise?
my staff, I didn't realize what they did. I mean, I just told them, do what the law requires. And I can't believe they went and did these outrageous things and they never told me about it. That's not a credible defense, but that's about as solid a defense as he's going to be able to come up with. Donald, like several very prominent people on Wall Street, does not use email. And he speaks not only in code, but through other people. There's a particular leader of one of the 100 biggest companies in America who talks to an assistant who talks to assistants. And that's why no prosecutor's ever been able to get him, even though it's widely understood and there's some public record indicating he's a major league criminal. And that's going to be Donald's defense, is I told these people to push the law as far as you can, but no further.
Then I take it that's the importance then of the district attorney going after his chief financial officer, Mr. Weissel.
That's right. And if they file a racketeering charge, that would be against Donald Trump, against the Trump organization, and people affiliated with it. That would include his 3 adult children who were employees of it, and especially Alan Weiselberg, who was the quote unquote chief financial officer. It's not that big an operation. He was the money guy all the way back to Fred Trump.
Can you actually imagine a former president of the United States being sentenced to prison in a New York State prison for these crimes?
It would be surprising. I think that a judge would think heavily about the implications for the country. On the other hand, there are other countries all around the world that have prosecuted and imprisoned former presidents. And I'm not talking about dictatorships. We've seen this in France, Italy. We may momentarily see it in Israel, and we've seen it, I think, once in the past in Israel. There is no reason we should treat the president differently, but that's sort of textbook level, not real world. I would anticipate it is most likely when Trump is indicted, he will show up, he'll be fingerprinted and identified and released. After all, the idea of bail is to make sure you can't disappear. Donald Trump can't disappear. He'd probably have to give up his passport, however. And upon conviction, most likely home confinement, but I would not be surprised to find out that it's a lifetime home confinement.
Amazing if that were to happen. And of course, at this point, no charges have been filed against Donald Trump. David Cay Johnston, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Coming up next, this week's winners and losers in the media. See if you agree with what the editors of Mediaite had to say about NBC News anchor Lester Holt. You're watching Brian Ross Investigates on the Law and Crime Trial Network. Time now for this week's winners and losers in the media, as chosen by the editors of Mediaite. And we're joined by Aidan McLaughlin, who is the editor-in-chief of Mediaite, which, like the Law and Crime Trial Network, is part of the Dan Abrams media empire. And Aidan, you've chosen as this week's winner NBC News anchor Lester Holt for his news-making interview with Vice President Kamala Harris.
About the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I mean, I don't understand the point that you're making. I'm not discounting the importance of the border.
And Aidan, that interview made plenty of headlines.
It did, yeah. It's been kind of the big news today. Now, Vice President Kamala Harris is down in Guatemala. She has been tasked by the White House to be the administration's face of their response to what's going on at the southern border. She's down in Guatemala, where she says that she's addressing the root causes of migration north to the U.S. southern border. Lester Holt, the NBC nightly news anchor, asked why she has yet to visit the border. She said, "We have visited the border," speaking about the administration. He pointed out very accurately that she herself had not visited the border. Now, you can say that this is sort of a partisan gotcha to note that she hasn't gone there yet, but I think there's no doubt that comment from her, the laugh and the comment that she has not been to Europe yet either, is going to be played in Republican attack ads for the next couple of years.
And Lester Holt's mild tone did not hide the fact these were tough questions for the vice president.
It's true, yeah, and you know, it was an accurate point to push on. And we're going to get more segments from this interview tonight. The rest of it's going to air on nightly news on NBC. And I have no doubt that we're going to have better, more tough questions from Lester Holt on top of this one about the border.
And then this week's losers for another interview, Stuart Varney for his interview with former President Donald Trump.
For the presidency in 2024, would you consider Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, as your running mate?
Sure, I would. But, there are numerous people that are great. I would certainly consider Ron.
And so why is Stuart Varney this week's loser, Aidan?
A couple of reasons, actually. The first one requires a little bit of context. Back in January 7th, one day after the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol, Stuart Varney, a Fox Business anchor, went on the air and said that Trump's presidency had ended in disgrace and that his political future was over. Now, cut to, 4 or 5 months later, Stuart Varney is interviewing President Donald Trump and is asking him who his running mate is going to be for a potential 2024 run. So it's a pretty staggering reversal there from Stuart Varney. Also, President Trump pushed a series of pretty nuts conspiracy theories about the election, that it was stolen, that Facebook was involved in stealing it. Stuart Varney did not push back at all. That is not something that our winner, Lester Holt, would have done. So Stuart Varney gets the loser for that interview with the former president.
And mostly for not pushing back on areas that clearly had much to push back on.
I mean, when the former president of the United States says that Facebook was involved in stuffing ballots to steal the 2020 election, a claim of which, one, there's no basis for, and two, is absolutely absurd on its face, and you don't say anything to correct it on air, that's doing a disservice to your audience. And it's not something that an anchor or a host should be doing.
Probably what Mr. Trump did expect, though, from Fox Business. Aidan McLaughlin, thank you so much for being here. Thanks to the editors of Mediaite for their great choices. And thanks to all of you for watching tonight. And a great big thank you to our staff at Law&Crime for getting us on the air and off the air.